The ice in my glass was the only thing colder than my wife's eyes as she leaned into Julian Vane, her hand trailing possessively over the sleeve of his $5,000 tuxedo. We were standing in the center of the grand ballroom at the Pierre, surrounded by the scent of expensive lilies and the suffocating arrogance of the city's elite. To them I was Mark Sterling, the compliance guy, a man whose personality was as gray as his off-the-rack suits. I was the safe, boring choice Elena had made when she wanted a husband who wouldn't cheat. Now that she was bored of safety, she was trading me in for a wolf. "Mark, darling," Elena said, her voice dripping with a performative pity that made the socialites around us smirk. "Could you go find the valet? My wrap is in the car, and Julian is taking me to the after-party at his penthouse. You look like you're ready for bed anyway. Or a spreadsheet. Whichever is more thrilling for you." Julian Vane didn't even look at me. He was busy adjusting his Patek Philippe, the gold glinting under the crystal chandeliers. He was the CEO of Vane Global, a man who treated the world like his personal playground and people like disposable assets. "Actually, Mark," Julian said, finally flicking his eyes toward me with the kind of disdain one reserves for a smudge on a window. "Before you fetch the wrap, get me another scotch. Blue Label. Me. You've been standing there like a decorative houseplant for an hour. You might as well make yourself useful to the people who actually move the economy." A low ripple of laughter went through the circle. These were people who measured worth in net profit and bloodlines. To them I was a zero. A placeholder. "I'm not on the clock, Julian," I said. My voice was low, devoid of the tremor they expected. It was a flat, clinical tone, the sound of a man who had already seen the end of the movie. Julian stepped closer, invading my personal space. He was taller, broader, and radiated the kind of unearned confidence that comes from never being told no. He leaned in, his breath smelling of peat and entitlement. "Listen to me, you little shadow," he hissed, low enough for only us to hear. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m. I sign the merger that turns my company into a monopoly. I've already taken your wife's loyalty. By tomorrow afternoon, I'll have her signature on a divorce filing that leaves you with nothing but your bus pass. You're a footnote in her life, and you're an obstacle in mine. Now get the drink, get the wrap, and disappear. The adults are talking." Elena didn't defend me. She didn't even look uncomfortable. She just watched me with a bored expression, as if waiting for a slow computer to reboot. 9 a.m., I repeated. I let a small ghost of a smile touch my lips. It was the smile of a hunter watching a wolf step into a steel jaw. "I'll make sure everything is ready for you, Julian. It's going to be a historic morning." I turned and walked away. I didn't storm out. I didn't look back. I walked through the gilded doors, past the bowing staff, and straight out into the cool night air. The valet didn't bring my modest sedan. Instead, I walked past the line of Ferraris and Lamborghinis to the end of the block, where a blacked-out, armored SUV was idling in the shadows. The driver, a man named Elias who had spent 15 years in special operations, stepped out and opened the rear door before I even reached it. "Good evening, Director," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Status," I barked as I slid into the reinforced leather interior. The average guy, posture vanished instantly. My shoulders squared, and my eyes took on the predatory clarity of a man who held the keys to the city's darkest secrets. "The tactical team is in position," Elias said, handing me a secure, encrypted tablet. "We've confirmed the offshore routing. Vane hasn't just been cooking the books. He's been laundering capital for the offshore cartels through the Green Horizon real estate project. And your wife, she's the one who digitally authorized the last 3 wire transfers using the credentials she stole from your home office." I scrolled through the data. My real name isn't just Mark Sterling. I am the director of the Special Oversight Division, a ghost agency with more legal authority than the SEC and the FBI combined when it comes to predatory corporate warfare. I had been undercover for 2 years, using my boring marriage to Elena as the perfect shield to infiltrate the elite social circles Vane frequented. I had known about their affair for 4 months. I had recorded their strategy sessions, in Vane's penthouse via a pinhole camera and a necklace I'd given Elena for our anniversary. I had watched them laugh at my expense while I sat in the next room, supposedly working on logistics, while actually authorizing the seizure of every asset they touched. "The merger tomorrow," I said, my voice dropping into a register that would have made Julian Vane's heart stop. "Is the bait taken?" "Vane thinks he's signing his coronation," Elias said. "He doesn't know that the holding company he's merging with is a front owned by our division. When he signs that paper at 9 a.m., he isn't becoming a billionaire. He's signing a total confession of liability and surrendering his entire corporate structure to the state." And Elena? She's listed as a primary beneficiary and co-conspirator on the fraud documents. She signed the design consultancy contracts that were actually laundering vessels. She's going down with him, sir. She thinks she's stepping onto a private jet. She's actually stepping into a cage. I looked out the window at the glowing lights of the city. I felt nothing for her. No anger. No heartbreak. Only the cold, clinical satisfaction of a professional. Elena wanted a man with power. Tomorrow I would show her what real power looked like. It wasn't a flashy watch or a penthouse. It was the ability to erase a person's existence while they were still breathing. Drive, I said. I have a few more calls to make. I want Julian Vane to wake up tomorrow morning feeling like a god. It makes the fall so much more satisfying when they've reached the peak. I pulled out my private phone and sent a single text to an encrypted number. All targets acquired. Initiate the blackout at 9:01 hours. I leaned back in the shadows of the SUV as we sped through the rain-slicked streets. Julian thought I was a footstool. Elena thought I was furniture. They were about to find out that the man they had been trampling on was the one who owned the floor. I thought about the wrap Julian had told me to fetch. I looked at the tablet. In less than 12 hours, the only thing Elena would be wrapping herself in would be a standard-issue jumpsuit. And Julian? The man who wanted Blue Label scotch would be lucky to get lukewarm water from a plastic cup. I spent the rest of the night in a secure command center beneath a nondescript office building in the financial district. My team was a collection of the most lethal minds in finance and law. We didn't use guns. We used algorithms and subpoenas. Sir, one of the analysts said, looking up from a bank of monitors. Vane just moved another $10 million into the Green Horizon escrow. He's emptied his personal liquidity to make this merger happen. Good, I said, staring at the digital representation of Vane's empire. It looked like a castle made of glass. Greed is the best lubricant for a trap. I glanced at the clock. 4 a.m. In my mind, I could see Elena waking up in Vane's penthouse. She thought she was the lead actress in a glamorous thriller. She didn't realize she was just a data point in a federal investigation. Director, the Attorney General is on line 1, Elias said. I picked up the phone. The warrants are signed, Mark, the voice on the other end said. The moment that pen touches the paper at the merger ceremony, we move. Vane Global, the subsidiaries, the offshore accounts, it's all ours. This will be the biggest corporate takedown in 50 years. Perfect, I said. I'll be there in person. I want to see the look on his face when he realizes who's actually signing his paycheck. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the dark monitor. The gray suit was gone. I was wearing a charcoal black, bespoke suit that felt like armor. I looked at my hands, steady, calm, dominant. The stage was set. Julian Vane and Elena Sterling were about to have the most public, most humiliating morning of their lives. And I was going to be the one to narrate it. Elias, I said, standing up. Get the car ready. It's almost 9 a.m. And make sure we have a bottle of Blue Label in the back. I want to offer Julian a drink before they take him away. It's only polite. The sun was beginning to rise over the Manhattan skyline, casting long, sharp shadows over the city. It was a beautiful day for a collapse. I walked out of the command center, my footsteps echoing in the sterile hallway. I was no longer Mark, the compliance guy. I was the architect of their ruin. The 0 was about to become the only number that mattered. The sunrise over Manhattan that morning was a bruised purple, the kind of sky that looked like it was nursing a grudge. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in our master bedroom, watching Elena sleep. She looked peaceful, her breathing rhythmic and shallow, oblivious to the fact that the bed she was lying on, the silk sheets she was wrapped in, and the very air she breathed were no longer hers. I had already cleared my personal safe and moved my essential documents to the secure facility in Virginia 3 days ago. I dressed in my usual costume, the charcoal gray suit from a mid-tier department store, the slightly scuffed black Oxfords, the sensible watch. It was the uniform of a man who didn't want to be noticed. It was the camouflage of the ultimate predator. Mark? Her voice was thick with sleep, but the instant she realized I was standing there, the warmth vanished. She sat up, pushing her hair back with a gesture of pure annoyance. Why are you staring? Creepy. And why are you up so early? You don't have that logistics meeting until 10. I wanted to see you before the big day, Elena, I said. My voice was a low, steady hum. The big day is Julian's, not yours, she snapped, swinging her legs out of bed. She walked past me to the bathroom without a second glance, already dismissing my existence. God, I can't wait until this afternoon. Julian is sending a car for me at 11. We're going to the signing ceremony, and then we're flying to St. Kitts for the weekend. You should probably use that time to look for a studio apartment, Mark. I've already talked to the lawyers. This house is too much for a man on your salary to maintain anyway. I've made my arrangements, Elena, I said. Good. For once in your life, be proactive about something. The door slammed. I didn't flinch. I just checked my watch. 7:45 a.m. The countdown had reached the final phase. At 8:30 a.m. I pulled up to the Vane Global headquarters. The building was a monolith of glass and steel, a monument to Julian's ego. I walked through the lobby, my cheap shoes squeaking on the polished marble. The security guards barely looked at my badge. I was just another corporate drone in a sea of suits. I took the express elevator to the 40th floor. When the doors opened, the sensory overload was immediate. PR teams were barking orders into headsets. Waiters were arranging trays of Cristal champagne. The air smelled of expensive cologne and the desperate, metallic tang of greed. Elena was there, standing by the window. She looked like a weapon in a white McQueen suit, her eyes darting around the room, making sure everyone saw her as the woman beside the throne. When she spotted me, her face contorted. She marched over, her heels clicking like gunfire. What are you doing here, Mark? I told you specifically, stay at home. This is a high-level corporate event. You're going to stand in the corner looking like a lost puppy and embarrass me in front of the board. I'm just here for the compliance check, Elena, I said, leaning against a pillar. I looked like I was struggling to keep up. Standard procedure for a merger of this scale. You know how the government is. The government doesn't care about a little logistics firm, Mark. Julian has the senators in his pocket. Just stay out of the way. If Julian sees you, he'll start making jokes, and I don't have the patience to laugh at your expense today. I promise, I said, by the time this is over, no one will be laughing at me. She scoffed and walked away, her hips swaying with the confidence of a woman who thought she'd just traded a pawn for a king. 8:55 a.m. The boardroom doors opened. This was the sanctum. A table of solid mahogany that had seen more betrayals than a Roman Senate. Julian Vane entered like a gladiator, his chest puffed out, flanked by a phalanx of lawyers whose hourly rates could feed a village. He saw me and stopped, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. Mark. My man, he shouted loud enough for the reporters at the back to hear. Come to watch the ink dry? I love it. I love the dedication to the man who's about to become your wife's new employer, and everything else. He walked over and slapped me on the shoulder, leaning in close. I've got to hand it to you, Sterling. You're the ultimate cuckold. Most men would have at least tried to swing at me by now. But you just stand there and take it. It makes me wonder if you even have blood in those veins or just lukewarm coffee. I have exactly what I need, Julian, I said. I looked him in the eye, really looked at him. I saw the tiny broken capillaries from years of scotch, the slight tremor in his hand that he hid by gripping his gold pen. He was a hollow man held together by tailored fabric and arrogance. Whatever, Julian chuckled, turning to the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to witness the birth of a titan. Vane International is merging with the Apex Group. We are creating a monopoly of progress. 9 a.m. Julian sat at the head of the table. Elena sat directly behind him, her hand resting on the back of his chair. The photographers crowded in. Julian picked up the gold fountain pen, the one he'd bragged cost $20,000, and pressed it to the signature line. He signed with a flourish. The flashbulbs went off like a silent war. Done. Julian shouted, standing up. The world is mine. Elena leaned in and kissed his cheek, her eyes finding mine in the crowd, filled with a triumphant, venomous glee. And then the world stopped turning for them. 9:01 a.m. The vibration started. It wasn't one phone. It was every phone in the room. A synchronized chorus of pings and buzzes that sounded like a swarm of hornets. I stood up from my chair at the back. My posture shifted. The compliance guy evaporated. My spine went rigid, my head went up, and the mask of the average man fell away to reveal something terrifyingly cold. Julian, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs of the board like a razor. I believe you just signed your own death warrant. The room went silent. Julian looked up, his grin faltering. What did you say, you little shit? Mark, shut up. Elena screamed, her face turning red. Security? Get him out of here. But security didn't move. In fact, 4 men in black tactical vests, labeled Federal Oversight, stepped through the boardroom doors. They weren't Julian's security. They were mine. Elias, my lead agent, walked straight to the table. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at me. Director. The blackout is complete. All assets seized. All accounts frozen. The tactical teams are at the secondary locations. Director? Elena whispered, her voice cracking. What is he talking about? Mark, what is this? I walked toward the head of the table. The board members scrambled out of my way as if I were a ghost. I stopped 3 feet from Julian. Julian Vane, I said. As of 60 seconds ago, you are no longer the CEO of anything. Vane International is being liquidated under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Your merger? The Apex Group isn't a company. It's a federally funded front. You didn't just merge your business, Julian. You surrendered it to the United States government. Julian's face went from pale to a sickly, mottled purple. This is a prank. This has to be a joke. I have lawyers. I have the governor on speed dial. Try the governor, I said, gesturing to his phone. He's currently being questioned by my colleagues in the next building. And as for your lawyers? I checked their retainers. Those accounts were frozen at 0901. They aren't working for you anymore, they're working for the public defender's office. Julian grabbed his phone, his fingers shaking so hard he dropped it on the mahogany table. He picked it up and stared at the screen. Frozen. Account restricted. Suspicious activity. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a primitive animal fear. Who are you? I'm the man you told to fetch your dry cleaning, Julian, I said. I'm the man whose wife you thought you could take without a consequence. But professionally? I am the director of the Special Oversight Division. I spent 2 years building a cage for you. Today I just closed the door. Elena was hyperventilating. She stepped toward me, her hands trembling. Mark, listen to me. I was undercover too. I was helping you. I knew you were something more, I was just playing along to get Julian to trust me. I looked at her, and for the first time in 5 years, I let her see the real me. Not the husband who forgot birthdays. Not the boring guy. I let her see the man who had ordered the destruction of entire cartels. Elena, I said, my voice like dry ice. I have the recordings from the penthouse. I have the transcripts of you laughing about how you were going to use the laundered money from the Green Horizon project to buy a villa in Tuscany while I rotted in the suburbs. You weren't undercover. You were a co-conspirator. And I've already authorized your arrest warrant. No, she whimpered, backing away. Mark, please. We're family. Family is built on loyalty, Elena. You built yours on greed. Elias, take her. 2 agents moved in. They didn't care about her McQueen suit. They grabbed her arms and snapped the steel cuffs around her wrists. The sound of the ratchet, click, 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 was the most beautiful thing I'd heard in years. Mark. You can't do this. I'm your wife, she screamed as they began to drag her toward the door. Not anymore, I said. I filed the annulment papers at 8:59. Based on your criminal activity, the morality clause in our prenup has been triggered. You're leaving with exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing but the clothes on your back. And since those were bought with my money, you'll be lucky if I let you keep the shoes. Julian was sitting in his chair, staring at the golden pen he had broken in his hand. Ink was leaking onto his fingers, staining them black. I'll kill you, he whispered, looking up at me. I'll have you erased. With what, Julian? I asked, leaning over the table. You have no money, no friends, no influence. Even the suit you're wearing belongs to the government now. You're not a titan. You're a data point in a case file. I turned to the board members, who were sitting in shell-shocked silence. The rest of you have exactly 10 minutes to vacate this floor. My team will be conducting a full forensic audit of your personal devices. If you've so much as taken a pen from this office, we will find it. They scrambled for the exits like rats from a sinking ship. I stood alone at the head of the table with Julian. He was sobbing now, the sound of a man who had built his entire identity on a house of cards and finally felt the wind. Elias, I said, not looking away from Julian. Take him to the intake center. Use the service elevator. I don't want the press to see him until he's in the jumpsuit. It'll be more impactful for the evening news. Yes, sir, Elias said. As they dragged Julian away, his heels scraping against the marble, I walked over to the bar. There was a bottle of Blue Label scotch, the one Julian had demanded I fetch for him. I poured a glass. Me. I sat in the CEO's chair, took a sip, and looked out at the city. The sun was fully up now, burning off the purple haze. The logistics were perfect. The timing was flawless. The destruction was total. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. This is Sterling. The Vane assets are secured. Begin the redistribution to the victims' fund. And someone tell the cleaners to come to the executive suite. There's some spilled ink on the mahogany that needs to be scrubbed. I took another sip of the scotch. It tasted like victory. Cold, calculated, and absolutely silent. The mask was off. And for the first time in a long time I could finally see the view. The Federal Interrogation Annex was a concrete monolith designed to break the spirit before a single question was even asked. No mahogany, no city views, no overpriced scotch. It smelled of industrial bleach, ozone, and the sour, stagnant sweat of people who had realized too late that the floor had vanished beneath them. I sat in observation room 4, separated from Julian by a sheet of one-way glass that cost more than his now seized Ferrari. Elias stood behind me, his arms crossed, watching the monitor. On the screen, Julian Vane looked like a man who had been dragged through a keyhole. His shirt was open at the collar, the black ink from the crushed pen staining his chest like a spreading disease. He was staring at the steel bolts in the table, his lips moving in a silent, frantic prayer to gods that had long since abandoned him. He's asked for his lead counsel 6 times, Elias said, his voice a low rumble. I told him that since his retainer was paid from the Green Horizon slush fund, his lawyers have been flagged for money laundering as well. They're currently in room 2 trying to save their own skins. He's officially alone. And the ex-Mrs. Sterling? I asked. In room 6. She's tried to seduce the junior agent twice, then threatened to sue the entire Department of Justice, and now she's just sitting there, staring at the camera. She still thinks this is a movie, sir. She's waiting for the hero to save her. The hero is busy, I said, standing up. I'll start with Julian. I want him to understand the logistics of his disappearance. I entered the room without a folder. I didn't need notes to dismantle a ghost. Julian jumped when the heavy steel door slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in a tomb. Mark, he gasped, lunging forward as far as his hand restraints would allow. Mark, listen. This is a mess, okay? A huge bureaucratic mess. But we can fix it. I have a secondary reserve. 20 million in a cold wallet, untraceable. It's in a vault in Zurich. It's yours. Just tell them the merger was a sting operation you were running. Tell them I was your informant. We can walk out of here together. I sat down, leaning back in the uncomfortable plastic chair. I looked at him with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a dying insect. Julian, I said, my voice low and dangerously smooth. You still don't realize where you are. You're not in a negotiation. You're in a funeral. That Zurich account? Number 88 Delta Zero? My team emptied it at 9:15 this morning. You didn't hide it from me. I was the one who suggested that specific bank to Elena 3 months ago through a leaked memo on my laptop. I didn't just find your money, Julian. I channeled it. Julian's jaw worked silently. The realization that his secret escape hatch was a trap I had built for him seemed to physically shrink him. You're a monster, he whispered. No, I corrected. I'm an auditor. And your life is out of balance. Every insult, every time you touched my wife, every bribe you paid to keep your empire afloat, it was all a line item in my ledger. And today I'm here to collect the interest. I stood up, looming over him. By tomorrow, your name will be removed from the Vane Towers. By next week, the buildings will be rebranded under Sterling Holdings. Your parents' estate in the Hamptons? Your sister's trust fund? Flagged. I am erasing the Vane bloodline from the financial history of this country. You won't just be in prison, Julian. You'll be a ghost. I turned and walked out, leaving him to scream into the empty air. Elena's room was different. She had tried to fix her hair, tried to maintain that mask of superior elegance that had been her armor for 5 years. When I walked in, she didn't scream. She smiled, that practiced, toxic smile that used to work on the Mark she thought she knew. Mark, she said softly. I knew you'd come. This has gone far enough, hasn't it? I know you're hurt about Julian, and I deserve that. I was stupid. He manipulated me. But we're a team. Think about everything we built. You don't have to do this to me. Sit down, Elena, I said. The coldness in my voice stopped her mid-sentence. She sat, her eyes finally beginning to show the first flickers of genuine terror. I didn't come here to talk about our marriage, I said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. I came here to show you the final audit of your life. This is the deed to the townhouse Julian promised you in Chelsea. Her eyes lit up for a fraction of a second. You kept it? I bought it, I said, through one of my shell companies. And this morning I signed it over to the City Housing Authority. It's being turned into a shelter for the families who were displaced by your Green Horizon project. The people you and Julian stepped on to build your dream life? They're sleeping in your bedroom tonight. She looked at the paper as if it were a poisonous snake. You ruined everything. For what? For pride? Because I found someone better than you? Better? I laughed, a short, dry sound. Elena, Julian was a puppet. I let him think he was winning so I could map the entire network of corruption in this city. He was a lure and you were the hook. You weren't finding someone better. You were falling for a man I had already marked for execution 2 years ago. I leaned in, my face inches from hers. I could smell her expensive perfume, the one Julian had bought her. It smelled like failure now. I watched you, I said. Every night for 4 months I watched the GPS pings on your car. I listened to the recordings of you two laughing about how predictable and boring I was. You thought you were playing a high-stakes game of intrigue. But you were just a rat in a maze and I was the one moving the walls. Mark, please, she sobbed, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away as if her skin were radioactive. I have nowhere to go. My mother won't take my calls. My accounts are empty. What am I supposed to do? You're going to do exactly what you told me to do, I said, standing up and heading for the door. You're going to know your place. Only your place isn't on a private jet or in a penthouse. It's in a state-appointed cubicle, working off a $4 million restitution debt for the rest of your natural life. I've ensured that the IRS morality clause is applied to every cent you ever earn. You will never own so much as a designer handbag again. I hate you, she shrieked, the sound echoing through the steel walls. I wish I'd never met you. The feeling is mutual, Elena, I said, my hand on the door handle. The only difference is, I have the resources to forget you ever existed. You'll be reminded of me every time you see a Sterling Holdings logo on a skyscraper. Which, in this city, is every 3 blocks. I walked out. Elias was waiting for me in the hallway. He handed me my coat, a bespoke, midnight blue cashmere overcoat that felt like a king's robe. The press is gathered at the front, sir, he said. The Attorney General is waiting for the joint statement. You're a hero today. I don't want to be a hero, Elias, I said, adjusting my cuffs. I want to be the man who owns the silence. We walked out of the annex through a private exit. A fleet of black SUVs was waiting, their engines purring in the night air. I climbed into the back of the lead vehicle. On the seat was a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside was the silver AV cufflink I had taken from Julian's desk weeks ago. I looked at it for a moment, then rolled down the window as we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. I flicked the silver trinket into the black water of the East River. My phone buzzed. A news notification. Breaking. Sterling and Associates completes acquisition of Vane assets. Mark Sterling named interim chairman. I turned off the screen. The logistics were finished. The shipment of justice had been delivered, signed for, and processed. I looked out at the Manhattan skyline, a jagged crown of lights that now belonged to me in ways the world would never fully comprehend. Julian was in a cage. Elena was in ruins. And I was exactly where I needed to be. Elias, I said. Sir? Drive to the airport. I have a flight to Geneva in an hour. I think it's time we audited the European accounts. I hear there's some ambitious people in London who think they're smarter than the men in the shadows. I'd like to meet them. Yes, Director. The SUV accelerated, carving a path through the dark, silent streets. I leaned back into the shadows of the car, closed my eyes, and felt the weight of the city settle onto my shoulders. It was a heavy burden, but unlike Julian, I knew exactly how to carry it. The 0 had become the only number that mattered. And the world was finally, perfectly, in balance.